Hey, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to today's Officially Green webinar. And the title of today's webinar is Blue-Green Sustainability, Bridging Oceans and Land Through Empathy and Action. And I'm thrilled that we have Ami Vitale with us. And today's session, we're going to explore different ways in which land and ocean ecosystem are deeply connected and how they work together to create a balance. Before I bring Amy help, I'm going to quickly talk about blue-green sustainability. Just for people that don't, that's still a little bit new to this topic or this area of interest. So just to give you a quick overview, blue-green sustainability is about caring for both our blue spaces, so that's the oceans, the rivers, and other waterways, and the green spaces, talking about the forest, the grassland, and the terrestrial habitats, knowing that they work together to keep our planet healthy. So think about it this way. If you imagine a forest next to a river, the trees in the forest help keep the river clean by catching dirt and pollution before it flows into the water. And the river in turn provides water to the plants and animals living in the forest. So if we take good care of the trees and the river, they both stay strong and healthy. And here's another example. Where we keep beaches clean and protect fish in the ocean, it helps the animal and plant too, and plants on land too. So blue-green sustainability is a comprehensive approach to environmental stewardship that integrates the protection of both marine and the terrestrial ecosystem, recognizing their interconnected roles in creating a sustainable planet. So think about it as a teamwork between the earth and the ocean. And by doing simple things like picking up our trash, saving our water, planting trees, we're helping the land and water work together to create a healthier, happier environment for everyone. And these are the core principles of blue-green sustainability. We look at ecosystem connectivity, biodiversity conservation. So when you're talking about ecosystem connectivity, you're talking about the coastal forests, the rivers, and the ocean, how they function together, and where changes in one environment, such as pollution from land, directly affect the marine health. And conversely, marine biodiversity influences coastal ecosystem resilience. And also, when you're looking at biodiversity conservation, you're looking at protecting diverse species across land and seas and strengthening ecological stability. And looking at climate resilience, then coastal ecosystem like mangroves and wetlands serve as natural buffers against extreme weather and sea level rise. So blue-green sustainability aims to bolster climate resilience through projects that address both land-based and marine vulnerabilities. And community-led conservation, and this approach values the role of local communities, promoting empathy and sustainable practices that account for the needs of the people and ecosystem, and also involving communities to foster stewardship and long-term conservation impacts. So actions that benefits both ecosystems, such as reducing plastic, like I said, create a ripple effect, or plastic waste, create a ripple effect of positive outcomes for biodiversity, for human health, and the economy. And why does this matter? Well, just quickly look at some statistics. Ocean as life support. Ocean produce about 50% of the oxygen that we breathe and absorb about 25% of the carbon dioxide we produce. So they also capture about 90% of the excess heat from greenhouse gas emission. However, pollution and overfishing are threatening this balance. So protecting our ocean protects our air, our climate, and our food resources. And we're looking at forests and carbon. So forests on land absorb about 30% of global CO2 emissions annually. Forests like Amazon rainforest, often called the lungs of the planet, are crucial for fighting climate change. What deforestation means we're losing about 10 million hectares of forest each year, an area roughly the size of Iceland. Let's talk about water pollution impacts. Around 80% of ocean pollution comes from land-based activities, including plastic waste. So this pollution affects about 800 marine species and results in toxic seafood that can end up on our plates. So if current trends continue, by 2050, I'm afraid that there could be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight. We can also look at biodiversity at risk. About more than 1 million plant and animal species face extinction, many within the next few decades. So healthy, diverse ecosystem, both land and water, support agriculture, medicines, air and water cycles essential for life. And protecting both ecosystems helps keep biodiversity intact. Also, look at food and livelihoods. Coastal marine ecosystems support the livelihood of about 3 billion people worldwide. Fishery alone provide protein to over 1 billion people, but unsustainable fishing and pollution are threatening the critical food source. And lastly, climate protection through coastal ecosystem. Mangroves and other coastal ecosystems act as natural barriers, protecting 50 million people globally from flood each year. So losing these habitats could double the number of people affected by coastal flooding by 2050. As we transition to the main highlights of today's session, I am thrilled to introduce our special guest, Ami Vitale. Amy's work has taken art to some of the most breathtaking and vulnerable places on our planet, capturing stories that reveal the beauty and the interconnectedness of our blue and green worlds. Through a powerful photographs and narratives, she inspires us by showing the profound relationship between people and nature, sparking both empathy and action. And you can look at the picture, you can see empathy and action in place. And by the way, I think, I'm not sure, we're still going to ask her. I think this is Amy dressed as a panda, carrying a baby panda. But we're gonna dive into that story as we go into this session. And as an internationally acclaimed photographer, filmmaker, and National Geographic ambassador, Amy has traveled to over 100 countries, documentary stories of wildlife conservation, environmental resilience, and the strength of communities facing environmental challenges. A compassionate approach is aimed at numerous awards, including recognition from World Press Photo and the International Photography of the Year Awards. Amy's passion lies in bridging the connection between people and nature, illustrating that conservation is not only about protecting wildlife, but also about empowering communities. And from capturing endangered species to highlighting conservation triumphs, like the groundbreaking efforts to save rhinos in Kenya, Amy's work embodies the empathy and commitment that defines true sustainability. Today, Amy will share insights into how storytelling can drive conservation and how empathy can bridge the gap between oceans and land, fostering collective responsibility for our planet. So ladies, gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ami Vitale. Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everybody, for waiting and hanging on. And we are just working through, I actually, it seems like a time of technical challenges. My computer died recently, so I got a new computer, and I am realizing as I try to share the screen here, let me see if it will. I have to open my system settings here and allow it to share. Let me just see if this works. But thank you. I'm gonna have to quit and reopen, so I'll be back in 1 second. Here we go. Hold on.
That's fine. Just give us a little bit of time to, as Amy is figuring out some technical issues. In the meantime, please, if you're in the panelist session and your name is written, please feel free to rename yourself as your name, because it seems that we're having same names of multiple person. Also, please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box. If you have any questions, please feel free to do that, and then we'll take those questions.
This seems to be a challenging day. We'll get there. Okay, so I'm just going to start by saying how much I believe in the power of visual storytelling and just storytelling. I've seen it make profound changes, and so I began my career covering conflicts. I wanted to understand why the world is the way that it is, and for about 10 years, really covered the horrors of the world. And finally, after a decade, I made this profound realization that all these conflicts I had been covering, at the backdrop of almost every single one of them, was the story of our ecosystem, our natural environments. And when when the environments start to break down, it leads to human suffering. And so I began to really refocus my storytelling and began to understand how important it is to tell the story of humanity and our relationship to the natural world. And I'm going to start with the story about pandas. You know, it was actually, I was invited to be a part of a film crew that was photographing this panda you see here as she was born in captivity, and they were sending her back to the wild for the first time. Um, and, I share this story because, it's a story that is unlikely. I think the key to really successful storytelling is maybe finding a story that everybody thinks they understand, that they know everything about, and then dig very deeply into it and share something that might surprise people. And then also the other key to really powerful storytelling is making sure that it relates, that it has a connection, a universal theme. But I got access as a film crew was going to document this story, and I wanted to be empathetic to this bear who was coincidentally named Hope. Look at her; she looks terrified leaving home forever. So I dressed up as a tree, and I hid behind all of these trees to make my pictures. And the head of the panda program saw me afterwards, came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for thinking about this panda. That was very thoughtful." And then he smiled and said, "I am going to let you hold two baby pandas." And then he followed that up and said, "I want you to know this is very special. I only let President Obama hold one baby panda." And that was when I knew that I had my in. And I think the key to any kind of storytelling is getting access to stories. And that's what I would recommend for everybody. Like, we all have access to something in our lives, and there are beautiful, important stories all around us. And I would say, rather than trying to find really a story halfway around the planet or in a difficult place, like, find what is closest to you and just take time and go deep on it. And that's what happened in this case. Like, just thinking ahead, planning, trying to be sensitive to, what the bears might be feeling, led me down this path to tell a story that was actually very challenging to get access to. It's an animal that they treat it with kid gloves. They don't give everybody access to it. But I found my end through empathy. And I think, really trying to be empathetic in everything that we do can often open up doors very unexpectedly. And this was like a breakthrough moment for me. I was just really in the beginning of my work around environmental issues. Nobody really knew me or trusted that I could tell a story like this. So I pitched it immediately to a National Geographic and said, "I have very special access to a difficult story." And they turned around right away and said, "I'm so sorry. No, we've done this story 8 years ago." And in National Geographic time, they don't redo stories generally for a decade. And so that's when I really had to get to work. And that is what I really encourage everybody in their storytelling to do, like, find a unique angle, because there always is a unique angle which hasn't been told before. And so I read everything I could about pandas, everything that had been written about them. So much so that, like, there were mornings I wake up and I was like, I feel like a panda, because all I was doing was like thinking, breathing, just my world was obsessed with the lives of pandas and getting beyond the stereotypes, because basically we have turned these creatures, we see them in cartoons, they're stuffed animals. They might be the most well-known animal on the planet. They're in, like, movies, Kung Fu Panda. We've kind of turned them into these adorable, almost cartoonish characters. But what I discovered, like, blew my mind because it was nothing that I had read. I mean, we're used to seeing them tumbling, down hills and falling from trees. And what I discovered was that they are actually incredibly solitary creatures. They remind me a lot of, black rhinos, for example, who are also solitary creatures. And the only time in the wild that you'll actually see them together is when they're breeding or a mother and her cub. And they are super elusive. Like, what surprised me so much was that they've been on this planet for millions of years, but were really relatively hidden from certainly the Western world and for much of the world. Nobody knew about them. And if you look at ancient Chinese art from 1,000 years ago, you will see representations of all these other kinds of animals, even other bears, lots of bamboo, but never the panda. And how did they do it? Well, they evolved over millions of years from being like other bears that were carnivorous to being almost exclusively vegetarian. Like 98% of their diet is just eating bamboo. And that means that they have to eat a lot of bamboo to get enough calories. So they basically hid out in these thick bamboo forests, and they adapted their whole body, their digestive system. They even developed a sixth thumb so that they could hold the bamboo better. And scientists believe they did this so that they didn't have to compete with other predators for meat. And so this is, basically that's where you would find the pandas, like on top of mountains in these, misty bamboo forest. But this is a man named Dr. Zhang Hemin, who was affectionately called Papa Panda. And he was the one that really gave me access to these bears. And this led me down this journey. And I'm going to, try to go quickly just because of time. But one of the biggest issues was that they knew they were threatened in the wild, critically endangered in the wild. So they said, we need to breed them in captivity. And they had this magic number of 300 captive born pandas that they wanted to have because they believed that that would allow them enough genetic diversity in captivity to keep the pandas alive and going in captivity for the next century in the event that they went extinct in the wild. And in the beginning, their breeding program had zero success. They did everything. And I mean, it gets crazy here. They went through lots of wild ideas. They got very creative. They literally brought television sets and showed the pandas videos of pandas mating so that they thought it might stimulate them to breed. That didn't work. And Papa Panda was the one that cracked the code. He was able to breed them in captivity after figuring out two really important things. The first was that females only have 24 to 72 hours in a year, this tiny window to get pregnant, not a lot of time. And then the second very critical thing is the females need choice. You can't just put any old male panda bear in with her. You need to give her choice. And once he kind of cracked the code and figured out these two things, they have a very successful breeding program. And this is what they look like when they're born: tiny, blind, helpless, 1/900th the size of their mother. This panda, I waited for 2 days and 2 nights without sleeping, waiting for this panda named Ming Ming to give birth. And it happened so quickly. And the baby kind of shot out of her. She turned around, picked it up in her mouth, and turned her back to me. And that was it. I had like about 30 seconds to get this picture. And I was under fluorescent lights, meaning that you have to have a very slow shutter speed. It's a little bit like when you photograph a television set, and the only way to get rid of those lines through your image is to have a slow shutter speed. And so I only had about 1 or 2 frames that was in focus because she moved. I had a slow shutter speed, and for the photographers in here, you'll understand this. So it was a difficult image to make, but this is what they look like even just a few months later after they're born. They're one of the fastest growing mammals on the planet. They grew like little bamboo shoots in front of my eyes, and they smell a lot like wet puppy dogs, if you're curious. But then I spent 3 years making multiple trips to try to document every aspect of the panda and what they were doing to try to bring them back from being very close to extinction. And here's where the story starts to get weird. All of us had to dress up as pandas. And look, I mean, it's kind of harder to rock a panda suit than you can imagine. They were not cute panda suits. And the other thing is, the panda suits were scented with panda urine because, as you all probably know, like most animals, pandas go by scent, not sight. So the idea was pandas should never be comfortable around humans. They were trying to rewild the captive born pandas, which is a very difficult thing. Trying to send an animal that was born in captivity to the wild and making sure they survive, you have to go through this very elaborate training. And it's a little bit like karate, where, they pass one test, they get their next belt, they get to, pass all of these other tests to make sure, will they survive in the wild? And this is when the story it was wild. I have to ask, who's the wild one, right? We all, everybody working with the pandas had to wear these costumes, and, it sounds, disgusting to get in a costume scented with panda urine. But I promise you, just to get close to these bears, I would do it over in a heartbeat. It was an amazing experience to be close to these bears. And, that sometimes, I mean, my theory about photography and making great images, sometimes it involves a bit of suffering to get the great images. And, anyway, the story was fascinating. They had to pass all these tests, like, do they run away from the predators, their natural predators, like leopards? So they would move these stuffed leopards into the enclosure, and if the baby was curious, she didn't pass the test and she would go back to captivity. But if she naturally understood that there was a threat to herself and ran to the top of a tree, she passed that test and went on to the bigger and bigger enclosure. And Papa Panda called the biggest enclosure of all graduating the wild, graduating Harvard and going back to the wild. And this was the last enclosure before the bear was sent into the wild. And, I really learned so much from this story. I mean, I think when we often think of China, we don't think of any good environmental news. That's generally the stories that are shared. But what I found really was so hopeful. I met some of the most dedicated people, really committed to protecting not just pandas, but really caring about the natural world. And what I learned, I thought there were a lot of things, that were very interesting for all of us. Like, one, how did they make everybody fall in love with a bear? They really rallied around the pandas and made an entire nation and, frankly, the world fall in love with pandas. And I think we should be doing that for all creatures. And they went from, the bear being critically endangered to, back in 2016, they actually delisted it from most critically endangered to vulnerable. And how did they do that? I mean, I think many reasons. The numbers of pandas are going up in the wild in the last surveys. Um, they understand that habitat is one of the most critical pieces, and they are actually turning a lot of, like, reforesting areas that were not forested and trying to connect existing corridors, not just for the panda, but for all wildlife. It was a story that really surprised me. And I think just because of time, I'm going to skip over that video and really, just quickly talk about my path as a storyteller. I think the key is, finding stories, yes, that everybody may think they know about, but finding a unique angle in. And back in 2009, I began my journey with the northern white rhinos. And interestingly, when I started this story, no media wanted to publish it. I wrote everybody I knew, and they all told me the same thing. They said, "Oh, yeah, it might be a good story for radio, but we don't think it's going to be visual." And the story was this: they were about to move four of these northern white rhinos from the Dvor Kralovi Zoo in the Czech Republic to Kenya. It was a last-ditch effort to save the entire species because back in 2009, there were only 8 of them known to be alive, all living in zoos. And they thought by flying 4 of them to Old Pejeta Conservancy in Kenya, it might somehow, the open air, room to roam, somehow it might stimulate them to breed. And so, with no support, I knew in my heart this story was important. And I think that is something I want to say to all of you is like, trust your instincts. Find a story that you think is important and just be relentless. Work on it. And when I say work on it over time, I mean years. I've been working on this story for 15 years. And in the beginning, nobody cared about it. And now today, it's probably the most important story I've ever worked on. So trust your own instincts. Um, I did go and start covering this story and, followed the rhinos back to Kenya. This is how we imagine rhinos open, roaming open plains of Africa, but this is actually what it looks like today. They have to be guarded around the clock 24/7 because the value of their horn is worth so much. And when I started this story, I started researching everything, and I found a hole in the story. And it's something that you have focused today on, which is community conservation. The one question I started asking is, what do the local people living with the wildlife think? Do they care? Um, and it turns out, yeah, the focus back then was on militarizing. We have to fight the poachers. And I just asked one question: what did the people living next to the wildlife think? And it led me down this amazing path, which I've spent the last 15 years finding lots of amazing stories connected to communities protecting wildlife. And I think just because I have 10 minutes left, many of you have probably seen these stories. Should we take time and actually take some questions? What do you think would be the best way?
I think you can actually go ahead, please. Then after you're done, we'll take questions. But I think we
Okay.
still have a little bit
And
of
if
freedom.
anybody has questions, maybe start typing them in now because I have to leave in 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. But I'm just going to finish this story. People like Yusuf, who have, so many people that I have had the privilege of knowing, they spend their lives really protecting these animals, people like Kamara here. And it's kind of led me down this incredible path of finding stories. This is another story called Verteti Elephant Sanctuary, and the Samburu community living aside next to them had a dream to create an elephant sanctuary. It's the first indigenous owned and run elephant sanctuary in Africa. People like they're doing things so differently here. This is Mary Lengies, and they also hire indigenous women to be elephant keepers. And it's something that I've really spent a lot of time working with the communities here, trying to amplify their work in all kinds of ways, from not just pictures, but writing about them, making films. I made a short film that I offered $10 downloads for, and we raised $250,000 just in that that offering the film and a big campaign alongside it. I, speak about these places and really try to share the voices, their beautiful voices and stories. And, I really realize that, the power of storytelling is real. I've seen it. I've really spent a lot of my life trying to amplify, and then I created a nonprofit called Vital Impacts, which now we are about to announce. We just are awarding $50,000 in environmental storytelling grants and a mentorship program, and we're going to announce the winners next Monday. And I hope that all of you follow along at Vital Impacts, because my goal is that, yes, I know the power of storytelling, but I want to see other people and support all the incredible work all over this planet, because there's stories all around us. They're in our backyards. And that's the kind of, I think that leads to great change. And I'm just going to quickly go through some more pictures, but, I see hopeful stories. And I think that that's part of what I want to help support is not just talking about the problems. I think many of us understand what the problems are, but the key is everywhere I go, whether it's extinction or climate change or loss of forest, um, plastics, I see amazing champions on virtually every story I've worked on. And I think the key for all of us is to understand we can do so much to help people around the world understand not just the issues, but where do we go with these problems? How do we amplify the people, the amazing people working to change the path that we're on? And I think that it's all about collaboration and partnerships. And I'm so sorry to rush through this. I hope we can do another talk again. But this is another story I've been working on where they brought black rhinos in Kenya back to a place where they were missing for 50 years. And for the first time in 50 years, black rhinos are now roaming in these places. They just sent me a letter that they had their first baby from the 21 rhinos that they brought back. And it's dangerous work, but I think the key is to focus on the hope. That's all we've got, actually. But I don't mean to be Pollyanna and only focus on the hope, because the challenges are great, right? We know that. Another report came out just about 12 days ago that said we have lost 73% of the world's wildlife in the last 50 years. And if that doesn't stop us in our tracks, I don't know what will. And so we've got to all be focused on this. And I guess follow up with questions later. You can email me. My goal is not to just tell all the stories myself, but to how do we create a whole, network of amazing storytellers and amplify the work and support all of you, if the storytellers. And to me, what you've so beautifully opened up with today is it's all about working with communities who are, the ones that are doing so much to change this trajectory. Should I end it there? And we have 6 minutes to take some questions. I'm just going to stop the share here. Let me just see here. Yeah. Do we have
Okay.
time?
Yeah,
Thank you.
so thank you so much, Amy, for sharing that fascinating and heartwarming look into your work. And just hearing about the efforts to save panda is truly inspiring. And from the chats, you can see a lot of people are very inspired by the story. And I think we can all agree that it takes serious dedication to dress up in a panda suit, let alone scenting it with a panda urine for extra touch of
Pretty
authenticity.
gross, right?
But it shows lots of passion. I think one question I have for you, because I have lots of questions, but because we have short time, I think you've talked about like a lot of challenges that you faced, and you've talked about the obstacles. Some questions are coming up about that. So we won't really get into that. But the question is there a dream project you have yet to tackle or a place you're eager to photograph and explore?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. To be honest, my problem is I see stories everywhere, right? And I of course would love to do them all, but I realize that the power of great storytelling is to pick one thing and go deep, right? And that's why I become obsessive in a way. Like I spend years on every single story. And I think that that is my advice for all of you is just pick something that is close to you that you can go and tell over time. That's my advice. And I'm actually trying to heed that advice. So the next stories I want to tell are in my backyard. I'm hoping to wrap up some of these stories that I've spent literally over a decade on. And, I continue to tell some of the stories that I've been working on so intimately with. But I'm really now trying to focus in the next coming years to find stories locally. I think that that's the key for all of us is to really work locally. Because what I'm finding is the themes are exactly the same. I've had the privilege of working in Kenya, which I know and love so deeply, but I find all of the same issues are totally the same where I live in my backyard. It's loss of habitat, it's climate change, it's ongoing droughts. We even have cattle rustlers in Montana, believe it or not. All the issues are the same. And so I think, I'm really focused right now on regenerative agriculture. How do we focus on these environments that we've degraded and try to restore them? That's where my energies are, as well as forest. I'm working on really, we have a map of the world right now. We know where the forests are that need to be protected. So these are the things that I'm working on in the future. But I'm curious and I want to hear from all of you. Please email me. Tell me what you're working on. I think the goal for all of us is how do we create opportunities for the storytelling? The stories are rich, the stories are powerful, but we need to sustain the storytellers so that you can be that really important link right now. I have seen how it can make an impact. But let me take more questions.
Yes, so there's a question by Samson. It said, were there any ethical dilemmas you faced while capturing these images, and how did you address them?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question, and there are always ethical dilemmas, always. And I really try to first analyze how how the work is going to impact the local communities. Do they want you there? Are you accepted? Go slowly. First, work on getting permission and the blessings of the communities that you're working in, because I think treading gently, treading lightly in the world is a very difficult thing. And I take a lot of time without my camera, first explaining why I'm there, what I hope the work will do, and I know we all make mistakes, but that is the very first consideration, making sure that people want you there, want their stories to be told. That is really the most important thing. Working with wildlife and communities can be dangerous when you're working with bears or rhinos, like it's dangerous work. So, really going slowly, making sure you're not getting in the way of the people who are doing the work, the veterinarians, all of the people on the ground. My first, thinking is how do I stay out of their way? And actually, if you're interested, my nonprofit, Vital Impacts, we will have bi-monthly meetings where we will go in depth with other speakers talking about ethics, talking about powerful storytelling, and how do you create it, but how do you be sensitive to the people that you're working with. And so again, just send me an email or go to my website and we'll have signups for those talks or with the Green Institute. I think we're really interested in more collaborations. But these questions, I can't cover them in 2 minutes, but they're super important. I love that question. And oh my gosh, I think I have to go. I have another I am so sorry. I'm
Um,
I'm so grateful for this.
one
And
last question.
yes, one last
Okay.
question, and then let's pick it up again.
One last question. I think this question is interesting. So, do you get attached in the course of this stories? If yes, how do you handle it? If no, how do you stay detached? I guess, do you get attached to the communities or to the
Oh my
subjects?
gosh. That is the most beautiful part. I mean, I literally I love the communication that we're able to have in today's world. Even the most remote places, people are on WhatsApp. And I love that. I love being able to make people feel seen and heard and beautiful. And staying in touch is the best part of what I do. As I said, I really, once I'm in your life, I never let go. And so really, I stay in touch with people as best I can because to me, that is everything that we have is that, human connection really matters. And being able to build those relationships is the most important thing all of us can be doing. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so sorry for the technical challenges. Those
Oh,
always exist, but let's do this again soon. And thank you. I love what you're doing,
so much.
and it's such a privilege to connect.
Thank you so much, Amy, for honoring our invitation. We'll pick it up some other time or have a
I
follow-up.
love that.
So we'll get questions and
Thank you.
wishing you a lovely, I guess, daytime over there. It's nighttime where I am.
I
Wishing you a
know.
lovely day.
Have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much again, and everybody for tuning in. Okay. Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So thank you everyone for joining. So if you have any questions or any ways you would like to connect, please feel free to send us a message. Apologies for the um some technical issues that we had at the beginning of the webinar. Just a slight announcement on how you can engage. The Officially Green webinar comes up 3 times, I'm sorry, 4 times a year. So this is our last official Green webinar. Next one will be coming up in February. So please feel free to attend that. Um, I'm just gonna make a little bit of announcement before we all leave. Just give me a second to share my screen. So yeah, so we have the Officially Green webinar. It's on Spotify. Please feel free to join on Spotify, and this session will be available for replay on Spotify. Also, we have the Green Microbiology Lab with Dr. Elena Yanka. If you're in microbiology and you would like to join the Microbiology Green Lab, please feel free to send us an email or visit the website at www.greenmicrobiology.org. Also on LinkedIn. We're looking for people to join our laboratory, whether it's a PhD student, whether it's a postdoc student. Please feel free to reach out to us. Also, the Officially Green campaign for the Green Institute. Please engage, share, like on various your social media pages. We're also going to be sending an email on how you can engage with us with the Officially Green campaign. And also, please ensure that you take the Green Pledge. And when you take the Green Pledge, you get the Green certificates. So thank you very much for taking time out. Hopefully we'll get to organize another session with Amy in the near future. And thank you for coming, and I wish you all a lovely night, day, wherever you are. Please feel free to share your LinkedIn pages, your email address, and connect with other people. So that you never know who is working in your area. So thank you so much for joining, and have a lovely night. Thank you.